Should we go ahead and start, or should we wait a few minutes for Jamie? Oh, he's waiting in the lobby. Okay. Okay, here's Jamie.
I think I got it.
Okay. What? Like a truck. We're back in.
Yeah, there's a hum or something.
Okay. Wait,
Sound like a lawnmower.
maybe I would. The committee of the whole meeting for Monday, May 24th, 2021. First item up is from the Director of Administrative Services. Ordinance 0031-2021.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here with another request to amend the salary ordinance for the personnel of the City of Gahanna. As you recall, I amended this a few months back. Could have been 6, could have been a year. At this point, who knows? But with the addition of our new economic development director, we had some staffing discussions internally there. So the request is to add the manager economic development at pay grade 20 to table 2. As you may recall, currently there's a economic development coordinator and an administrative assistant funded for this department. We will not be filling the administrative assistant role and be working to fill this manager role. In addition with that, Joanne and I will be meeting shortly to discuss and realign salary and benefits money for the city that's already been appropriated, and then we'll bring forward any appropriate action that may be required for that as well. And the second request is as a result of our compensation study that's ongoing, the Fair Labor Standards Act's exempt statuses were reviewed, and after that review, our project inspector was determined to be an exempt position, which means it is not eligible for overtime and it is a salaried position. So we're requesting to modify that FLSA status for our project inspectors as well. And there is a request for emergency and waiver, so we can move the economic development manager and getting our employees transitioned over to the correct FLSA status. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe Director Strum is on the line as well if you have any questions about his economic development.
Anybody have any questions?
Just so I know who's in that office, what's the current staffing of the Economic Development Office?
Just the Economic Development Director.
Okay.
There are no staff members.
And then in planning, there's Director of Planning, and then who else is in planning now?
Director of Planning, there's an administrative coordinator, building, zoning, and code enforcement.
All the enforcement officers.
Yeah, there's 3.5 code enforcement officers.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does Gen 6 count in the as a? I know she's not employed, but she doesn't count as a staff person.
She's funded out of the contract services line, not salary and benefits line.
Okay. But she still is currently working under contract. Okay.
Yes.
She and I'll jump in. She has been, as our only consistent development person for the last 18 months. She's up to her elbows in a lot of projects right now. So we're going to continue to use her services as we continue to work through some of those projects, because she's been the lead on those and really the only point of contact for many of them.
Sure, she's the one that people have known for the last several months.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Let's see. This is waive second reading. So this would be for, do you want this on regular or consent agenda? Anybody preference?
Consent.
Consent, okay. So this will be on the consent agenda for the first meeting in June.
Can we keep it off of consent since it's emergency and waiver, please?
It's not emergency, it's just waiver. Oh, yeah, it is emergency. I didn't see that. Yep, you're right. Okay, regular agenda then. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Discussion from the Department of Public Safety.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and council members. This is Director Nguyen with Public Safety. If you recall, we had a discussion in 2020 emphasizing the need to identify and incorporate effective strategies designed to make strides in community-oriented policing that allows Gahanna to continue to improve its strategies in implementing 21st century policing practices. Today, we are pleased to announce that the City of Gahanna Division of Police continues to implement strategies designed to incorporate all 6 pillars of policing. Those 6 pillars are, once again, building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer wellness and safety. In the coming months, the division will be upgrading its existing body-worn devices to activate the camera feature. This upgrade is with the division's current in-car camera vendor, Utility. The division has been with Utility since 2009. They have provided secure data connections to its marked fleet and AVL services. The existing in-car system and same body-worn device have been in service on the streets of Gahanna since 2017. The upgrade will include 64 body-worn devices and an upgrade of 21 in-car camera systems. This equips every member with a device, allowing for individual accountability. The cost of the project is approximately $160,000. Costs are contained within our current existing budget, and requires no city action at this point. We understand that it was delayed as a result of COVID from this past year, so we are now pleased to move forward with the implementation of this phase of the body-worn devices. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Spence, who will cover some of the features and why Utility.
Thank you, Director. We do have some video that we're going to display. This video is from the actual video management system. It is of a foot patrol of the Creekside area. There is audio, but we're going to mute it because I'm going to talk over as the video rolls. But some of the features, the camera is integrated into the officer's uniform. There's less chance it can be dislodged when using a magnetic attachment system. So the device is part of the uniform. The back-end management and administrative system is already in place and actually has been in place for several years, and you're viewing it now. There is a redaction software that's integrated into the system. Really no additional training or demand on IT resources will be required with this system. It is cloud-based with cloud storage and access. The system is CJIS compliant, criminal justice information systems, the FBI security requirements for law enforcement agencies that house CJIS data. That's why we're kind of showing you a screen capture as opposed to a live dip into the system. As you can see, it has integrated GPS. It's not only GPS of our vehicles, but it does have GPS capability of the individual body-worn device. This system allows for many activation automations. We plan on equipping our officers' holsters, their duty holsters for their firearms, with a sensor that would indicate if the weapon was drawn. Currently, it would activate with our light bars when the overheads are activated. Our officers are already and have been carrying for 3 years a Bluetooth device that interacts with this equipment, so that each officer is equipped with a Bluetooth device. There are many other automations that this system offers. The buffering of the audio and video, again, audio and video both, allow for pre-incident capture. Currently, that's set at 2 minutes in the system, but it can be expanded for an additional cost. Our computer-aided dispatch, or our CAD system, that's the software that runs pretty much the entire division, will be integrated with this system for total incident capture. The system automatically organizes video and audio by incident, time, and GPS location or proximity. So if there are multiple officers in a specific geographical area, it will automatically categorize all that video and allow for total incident recreation. There is a watermark of video, so when it is exported from the system, it is watermarked, and that's for tracking and security purposes. Why utility? We did consider other vendors. There's essentially 3 large-scale vendors in the country when it comes to body-worn cameras: Motorola, WatchGuard. WatchGuard was an independent company. They were bought out by Motorola, and then Taser, Axon. Utility was already in use, the device and system familiarity. So not only the back-end software, and really I'm going to take a pause here. The camera systems, to put a camera on an officer is inexpensive. It is the back end, it is the storage, it is all of the components that really is where the expense lies. So that system is already in place. The cost of so we have system familiarity and certainly load bandwidth on our IT infrastructure. The cost of an upgrade of our existing system, it's far less than if we were to go to another major vendor. If we were to integrate WatchGuard or Taser Axon, we're looking at a price tag of anywhere from $300,000 to a high end of $450,000. Also, the CAD integration piece, that can come at considerable cost, $50,000 to $60,000, because we have an existing relationship. We're going to be able to achieve that for about $15,000. This system has many automations of processes, so less chance of unrecorded incidents. Captures both audio and video. Again, that's pretty much the hallmark of this system. What sets it apart from other vendors are the many automations that it allows. It's the only body-worn camera vendor that's endorsed by the NAACP. I believe the mayor and the safety director have a copy of that endorsement letter. Timeline. So our project is already underway. We anticipate beginning the deployment of devices about early July. We're going through uniform retrofits, which will start this week. This will be a weeks-long process to equip the many uniform items that are worn by our officers. The CAD integration piece, that will require the technical resources not only of our own IT department, but that of utility body-worn and our CAD vendor, which is Central Square. That's a lot of more or less coordination between 3 entities. So that won't hamper our deployment timeline, but the CAD integration will follow on post-device deployment. Some of our challenges. The redaction software. There's no perfect solution with artificial intelligence. The redaction piece requires someone to view and apply those redactions. There are provisions in public records law, 14943 of the ORC. There are about 26 separate redactions that are required under Ohio law when it comes to police body-worn video. That all equals staff time dedicated to management, discovery, and public records requests. At this time, we're going to manage this load with our existing staffing, but we realize that this could be a pretty substantial administrative burden, especially when you start deploying 64 devices. Other challenges, policy development. Our current body-worn device policy comports with the standards set forth by the Ohio Collaborative for Law Enforcement Agency Certification and CALEA. There are other standards that we need to, other considerations that we need to look at, specifically related to detectives conducting interviews in the field, SRO operations. We need to take a closer look at how those devices will be in terms of how they'll be managed in the field with those specialized functions and staff. Also, consideration of when to automatically begin recording. Again, our current system has a number of automatic activations already set up. you know, there's a lot of consideration of whether it's from the point the call is dispatched or from the time the officer arrives on the scene. Anytime there's more recording, it equals, you know, more redaction, more retention issues, storage, and staff time. Finally, one of the biggest challenges, the public expectation of near real-time release of recordings after a major incident. As I mentioned earlier, this, you know, there is no artificial intelligence that automatically goes through all the video that's captured and audio related to an incident and applies all those 26 redactions. You know, but there is a public expectation that this is just automatically available within minutes of an incident. So that's another challenge for us. Ultimately, in closing, this project is a work in progress with adjustments to our operating procedures, our policies. We expect those to evolve, change, and adapt as we need them to adapt. Finally, some future goals, and I'll give you a website to take a look at. If you look at the Fremont, California Police Department, they have a public accountability portal where they put a lot of their body-worn video, especially they do a very good job of post-incident recreation and kind of telling the story of officer involved encounters. So I would have you see that, take a look at the Fremont, California Police website. They do an excellent job. That's a kind of a gold standard, something we'd like to strive for, especially that public accountability portal. So with that, I think the director and I are available for questions. I know that Kevin Schultz from IT, obviously he's a critical partner in this project as well. So I think all of us are on board in case anybody has any questions.
Chief, I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Very impressive presentation. My hat's off to you. You probably already said this, but how long is the data stored of any, you know, I don't know what you call it. You know, when an officer is out on the street, is that data stored for 24 hours, 7 days? You know, what is it?
So the data is the data is captured on the device, on the body-worn device, and then it is uploaded pretty much in near real time to the vehicle router. When the vehicle gets back in contact, or the device gets in contact with one of the waypoints, and we have waypoints on our building. We have some out at the fleet facility, and we're going to expand a few of those, including over to 400 West Johnstown, the new operations center for Mifflin Township. So that video is automatically captured, and it's archived, and it's offloaded pretty quickly. Obviously, we've got you know, this will be a kind of a work in progress as to how quickly it goes from the cruiser back into the station. But there's no officer intervention with the device. They don't have to undock it, dock it somewhere. It occurs in real time. So. You know, that's. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was actually I was fumbling. Records retention. How long is that?
Okay, so the system allows us to customize what that retention is. Obviously, if it's related to an incident, we're already offloading that video. If it's an arrest situation, use of force, that's automatically stored, and then it's stored to comport with whatever that retention schedule is. If it's benign video, we can store it up to 1 year. I think we'll probably the best thing is that this system allows us to categorize video. You know, for example, I'm out with a disabled motorist. There's no you know, interaction other than waiting for a tow truck. We can categorize that, hold that for 90 days, and then allow that to delete. If it's something else, again, all of this is customizable. So that what I can tell you is the records retention will certainly cover the city in terms of making sure that if there are any complaints or if there's any type of you know, need to retain it, it will be retained.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief?
Yes.
If you're out of the district, let's say you're we're called to help with something, for instance, in downtown Columbus, which we have done in the past, does the system still work?
Absolutely. As the video will house on the individual device, and it has, you know, a pretty expansive storage capability. As long as that device is within proximity of a Gahanna cruiser, it's going to offload into that secure router that sits in the trunk of every one of our marked vehicles. And then when that vehicle makes it back, or that device makes it back to the city, it'll offload. And we've never, you know, as I mentioned before, Karen, this is the same system as our in-car and all the audio recordings for the body-worn devices. We have not lost any video. It's not been corrupted in any way. We've had really good success with this management system.
Thank you.
Brian, did you have a question?
I may have missed it looking at the schedule. What's been the feedback from the officers?
You know, we implemented this about 3 years ago. Again, the same system. Essentially, all we're doing is turning on the camera and obviously expanding our storage capability with the company exponentially. We are getting new devices because they've made a lot of feature enhancements. But in terms of you know, the officers, it's pretty much second nature to have them as currently. So we don't anticipate any issues. You know, we're just working through the needed process for uniform retrofitting. I think Marissa had a question.
Oh yeah, she's getting her next.
Okay.
Marissa?
Thank you. A couple questions. Could you go over the cost again, both for the devices and for the storage? And I know you said that it's not going to require council action, but if we could just have those numbers again. Yeah,
the total for the upgrades $160,000. That's over 3 years. That's 3 years of the project. That's the total cost of ownership. That includes, I think it's broken down by year 1, year 2, year 3. I think it's $66,000 for year 1, and it steps down from there. But the total cost of ownership is $160,000. We do anticipate some minor costs that are not included, and that's we want to add at least one more waypoint. That's about $3,500, and again, those costs would come out of our existing budget.
And my follow-up question, I think I know the answer to this, but just so we're clear on it, an officer cannot access video once it's been recorded. The officer on the can the officer access video? I guess.
Yes, they can, but they can't manipulate it in any way, and they can't download it in any way.
Okay. How do they access it? Do they have to go? They can access it through their devices in their cruiser.
Yeah, they're mobile data computers.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Just so they could review the video of what happened.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Oh, so we don't need to do. We have no action on this.
There's no council action required. Again, this is already included in our budget, and again, I think I forgot to mention, but it's a 3-year cycle, and also as the director mentioned, this will also replace all of our in-car cameras. That way, the in-car camera and the body-worn device will sync much better because it's all new technology and kind of like and like.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you both. Thanks, Mr. Wynn, and
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So needed. Okay, we shall move on if there's no other questions. Items from the Director of Public Service and Engineering.
Good evening, everyone. We have a handful of items for you this evening, so unfortunately, I don't think we can leave at 7:30. But getting started.
So sad.
Talk fast. So.
Getting started, our first item is permission to bid Havens Corners waterline improvement. This project consists of replacing roughly 3,500 feet of existing 12-inch wire line on Helmbright Road between Oak Creek Place. Not on Helmbright, I'm sorry, on Havens Corners between Oak Creek and Helmbright. The line was originally installed in the 1960s and has experienced frequent breaks over the years. I'm sure some of you might remember some of them shooting over the power lines. The project will also include replacing roughly 500 feet of 2-inch water line on St. Stephen's and St. Martin courts, which also has an extensive history of breaks. Following the installation of the water line, St. Stephen's and St. Martin will be fully reconstructed. So we're respectfully requesting a motion permitting the formal bid of this project.
Any questions? None? Okay. So we will move this ahead onto the, everybody okay with consent? No need to come back?
Yes.
All right.
That's fine.
So for ordinance 0033, we will have it for first reading and then no need to come back and then on the consent agenda. Okay, next one, 0038.
Hey, Nancy, real quick.
Sure.
Just, did you say 0033 was consent?
Yes.
I thought we're, aren't we on 0012? Just a small technical matter.
I don't see 0012. Am I looking at something different?
It was the first one.
Oh, no. Wait a minute.
It's the Havens Corner.
Oh, you know, that's not in order. Okay, hang on. It's number 7. You're right.
Okay.
I was going down. I thought he was just going down the list that we have, and I see it's way down here. So it's just a motion.
Sure. So,
thank you.
right. So I'm looking at the agenda. Just want to be clear here for the record that it's 0012 is going for consent, right?
Yeah, this doesn't have to have a second reading, does it? It doesn't have to have just.
No, I think we're good. I just heard 0033, and I believe we're on 0012.
But I had
Okay.
said
Perfect.
I said that it would be on first reading, but I don't think it has to have first reading and second, does it? It just is on the consent agenda. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Consent's fine, yeah.
Okay, so this will be on the consent agenda for the first week in June then. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. So where are we going now, Mr. Crawford?
2.
Thank you. Our next item for you tonight is permission to bid Greenville Street intersection improvements, as well as a request for a supplemental appropriation, which is tied to that project. So this project will be repairing and/or replacing 5 traffic signal pole foundations along Greenville Street at the intersections of Flint Ridge, Lincoln Circle, and Mill Street. The foundations were found to have structural deficiencies that required immediate action. Temporary signals have been installed while we work to complete these much-needed repairs. The overall traffic pattern is not expected to be impacted by the maintenance work. However, there's likely going to be temporary lane closures, intermittent flagging while the work's being completed. We are requesting a supplemental appropriation to fund these emergency repairs. Because we will request bids for multiple options to address the foundation issues, the final scope of the work will not be determined until the bidding process is complete. So our current best estimate of repair costs are about $175,000. So additional funds may need to be requested once bids are received and accepted and the actual repair work begins. So we are respectfully requesting a motion permitting the bid of this. And then due to the emergency nature of the repair, we are requesting a waiver of the supplemental appropriation in order to begin the process right away.
Any questions?
Yeah, do we know what the cause was of this? What it made this? It was just old age or something else?
It was a deficiency in how the foundations were constructed. Basically, the wrong foundation was installed.
Thank you.
So again, just a technical kind of housekeeping point here. That's this this discussion item is both motion 0013 as well as ordinance 0036. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, no objection from me, Nancy, if you just want to move those along to consent.
Okay. All right. Anybody else object to these being on the consent agenda?
Yeah, that's fine.
No, ma'am.
So we have two items, motion, as Michael said, 0013 and ordinance 0036. All right. Okay. Next item.
I think the mayor is going to kick us off on the next one.
Oh, sorry, I lost track. I was trying to follow the agenda myself. So thank you, Grant. Appreciate that. So the next several items, it would be 0034, 0038, 0035, and I actually think 0033. So 4, 5, 6, and 7 all pertain to the sidewalk program. So you might recall that back in April 26th, we presented an overview of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan. And John Moorhead, our city engineer at that time, had laid out that program for you that had been months in the making, almost a year in the making or more. Part of that ADA transition plan said that we would adopt a sidewalk maintenance program because maintaining sidewalks is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So what you're going to present, what we're going to present to you tonight is actually the sidewalk maintenance program that we said we would adopt as part of the ADA transition plan. Now, for as most of you know, and many of you who've been around for a long time, this topic is not a new one. It's not a foreign one. The concept of a sidewalk program is something that has been discussed by council for a while. But I am happy to say that over the last 18 months, these are really the biggest steps that we've taken toward actually implementing a sidewalk program here. So what we're going to present to you tonight is the final proposed version to present to you. I recognize that there is a lot to talk about with this program. And to just kind of refresh your recollection, again, our city engineer, John Moorhead, first presented a proposed program to council at Committee of the Whole back on November 9th of 2020, if you could remember back that far. We then discussed this at length at council on November 23rd and again on December 14th. So what we did was take all of that feedback and discussion that you had. We then were working on the ADA transition plan. We sought public input. We received public feedback from that. And we've rolled all of that, taking all of that input and feedback that we received. We took all of that into account in putting together the program that we are going to outline for you tonight. Sidewalk maintenance, as many of you know, we've talked about it before, is the responsibility of homeowners under the state law here in Ohio. And we recognize that this is not an inexpensive fix for many residents, and home ownership can really become burdensome at times. And this is another one of those things that could potentially be financially burdensome for some folks. We think that this program is a way to help our homeowners assume that responsibility that they have under state law to maintain their sidewalks, and also to then bear that burden and make this affordable for them. The program will help our city to move forward while also helping to alleviate the financial burden for our residents as they work to maintain their legal compliance with state law. There are several code updates that will be needed, hence the 4 separate code provisions that we just outlined above. John Moorhead is, I'm going to turn this over to him here in a second, and he's going to walk you through each one of those code changes that we're talking about, why there are 2. Section 521.06, there's kind of a, if not this, but that kind of approach that we're taking for you. Again, we recognize that this is the start probably of some extensive dialogue. I think back to last March when we spent 30 to 45 minutes talking about where the word "the" should go, but that's when you get a lot of attorneys in the room and that's what happens. So we're talking about 4 major code sections here right now. So I don't expect that this is going to be a short conversation. So John will walk you through all of this. He's been spearheading the effort on this program since he started to work here in August of 2019. And I think he's finally getting ready to finally get to the batter's box and at least take this to first base, as we talked about earlier today. So with that, John, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having me back here to talk about sidewalk program again. I promise it will be condensed to the last 3 presentations we've had. We've put that into one presentation tonight, which I'm going to go through to give a refresher of the different details of this program, what we're proposing, why we're proposing it, and what the financial background of that program would be for the city and our residents. After that presentation, I'm going to go into the code sections the mayor mentioned, and we'll go through each of those so that we can clear up any questions that there may be about the particular sections, what they mean to the program, what they mean to the other city operations in general, and we'll try to see what questions we can address through that. But the first step, I'm going to pull up a presentation here that hopefully you all will see, and we'll go back and recap some of our sidewalk program goals. Now, hopefully you all see this program in a presentation view, because I do not. So, Mayor, I can see you, so please nod your head. Okay. So this proposed sidewalk maintenance program is a feature that we're presenting as a means to help maintain the sidewalks throughout the city in a more comprehensive and focused plan than has been in place in the past. This is a policy decision that many surrounding communities have used to help them achieve these same goals of both increasing the affordability of sidewalk maintenance to residents and also the effectiveness of where you maintain sidewalks, making sure that going from point A to B is a success for those who just want to enjoy the pedestrian experience, those who are disabled and rely on those sidewalks to get around, and help enhance the community as a whole. As the mayor did mention, we do have legal obligations for the sidewalk program, and those are spelled out both in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which did say that all accessible routes must be maintained in operable working condition. And for us, those routes are sidewalks in this public right-of-way. In terms of maintenance authority, the city code addresses what the standards would be that sidewalks need to be maintained to, and that is where we define this operable working condition term is within our own code, within our own adopted standards for maintaining sidewalks. And as the mayor did mention, under state law, Ohio Revised Code 72901, property owners adjoining sidewalk are responsible for that sidewalk's maintenance. Gahanna's own local code, 52106, spells out that process as it relates to the city of Gahanna. Now, the program that we're proposing relies on an inspection that we conducted back in 2019 through 2020. And in those years, we went through and looked at a selection of streets that represent various ages of streets, sidewalks, and homes in Gahanna, and collected information to figure out what exactly is the current condition of walks in our city and what maintenance needs are there. In whole, roughly 16,000 sidewalk panels were inspected by that, and we found that nearly 30% of those needed some measure of repair. That is an expensive endeavor. We have roughly 300 miles of sidewalk within the city, and if you look at maintaining 30% of that, that's quite a large bill if it were to be done in one fell swoop. Now, we're fortunate that Issue 12 success is going to enable Gahanna to help dedicate funding towards that sidewalk maintenance and allow us to make this an affordable way for residents to actually seek this maintenance on their own sidewalks. Now, the program itself, and we should be seeing a program overview slide at this point. The program itself that we're presenting is a 15-year plan that would be active across all wards of the city in any given year. This would work through the city in a planned fashion so that in each program area each year we will inspect all sidewalks in that area and then send a notice to the property owners if their sidewalks have a need for maintenance. Following that notice, there'll be two options presented. The simplest one is to opt out, And that would take an affirmative action by the resident to let us know that they are choosing to make those repairs to sidewalks themselves. They would secure their own contractor, pay for those repairs out of pocket, and seek a right-of-way permit from the city, which is a free permit we issue to that resident, and we would inspect their work to make sure that it's done properly. If a resident is so inclined, happens to know someone who can repair their sidewalk for them with a good price, then that may be a good option for them. If they don't elect to opt out, they would automatically be opted into the program, which is a publicly run capital project to maintain the sidewalks within the program area. In that scenario, the city itself would assemble a public bid document to contract out the repair of that walk. We would bid it, we would find the lowest and best contractor, and we would move forward with them to make those repairs. Engineering staff would administer the contract. We would oversee the construction to ensure that quality materials, quality workmanship was being performed. And then at the end of that process, the city would pay that contractor. So we would pay upfront for the cost. Following that, the residents whose sidewalks were improved would reimburse the city that cost at 5 years, over 5 years at 0% interest rate. Now that cost to a resident would be only for that sidewalk that is repaired on their property. And we'll be tracking throughout the program every square foot of sidewalk repaired everywhere in the program area so that we have a direct cost to a direct property for every bit of work that we do. That is the general overview of the program, and we would expect that this cycle would repeat year on year for the next 15 years at least before we could work through the city. What that would look like in terms of cost we'll get to later, but one of the aspects of this program is trees. We have found through our inspections and just through looking at the different streets in the community that there are times when a street tree itself is the cause of sidewalk disrepair. And unless a resident opts out and chooses to maintain the sidewalk on their own, trees that negatively impact the sidewalks may be removed by the city, and that would come at no cost to the adjoining owners. We would take on that burden to take the trees down and repair the sidewalks. Excuse me. Now, the residents would still pay for the sidewalk repairs, but taking the tree down itself can be a long-term cost-saving benefit. The picture that you see in this slide is actually Cloverly. That is a street that is 27 years old. So this sidewalk is relatively young in terms of concrete work. And as you can see, this tree has caused it to upheave into a point of disrepair. So if this tree, which is a calorie pair in this instance, were to remain, you may see that in maybe the next 4 or 5 years, you would have to replace the sidewalk again. So sort of the root of tree removal as it relates to sidewalk maintenance is trying to avoid these continued problems where trees are causing situations where the sidewalk falls into disrepair. We've worked with our comprehensive landscape plan, our city forester, to build guidance on when trees may be removed or when they can be preserved. There are cases where both would apply, and you'll be hearing later tonight from our Parks Director, Stephanie, about some of that guidance that we developed. That's one of the code updates that you'll be seeing. Preserved trees may be pruned to minimize conflicts with the sidewalk and pedestrians. This is to maintain clearance across the walking area so that there's no branches or shrubbery in the way of pedestrians trying to make use of the sidewalks. Now, cost-wise, maybe arguably the most important part of this program, we have gone through and reevaluated what the program was presented as back in November and December of 2020. At present, the estimated annual cost for a 15-year program is $1,150,000, and that represents approximately $600,000 less per year than what was presented previously. Now, the difference there is from a number of factors. So we talked about trees a bit, and in working with our city forester and parks guidance, we have found ways to save trees avoid removing them in certain cases where they can be preserved, and that alone accounted for a significant cost reduction just by virtue of less tree removal to be done. The other big component of this was looking at our standards for repair rather than replacement. And repairing a sidewalk, and in particular using a method known as precision cutting, is significantly cheaper than replacing a panel itself. We actually had a trial of this out front of City Hall. You can see an example of this process, at least the end result of it, right in front of 200 South Hamilton Road. And what we were able to find is that we could utilize this process widely across the city and avoid the need for replacing a panel. So all in whole, we think this cost savings is significant in helping both the city fund this program and allow other initiatives to move forward, and also reducing the cost that may be assessed to the adjoining resident. Again, the city would pay up front for those repairs, and then the cost would be recouped over 5 years at 0% interest through an assessment. Now, the table on this slide off to the right here shows an average cost. If we were to look at your average sidewalk disrepair across the city, and you were to view this as a resident to say, what might this cost you? The biggest factor there is just how much sidewalk you have to repair and the width of your lot. So in some of our older neighborhoods with smaller lots, they have 60 foot of frontage, and you might see $480 total of sidewalk repair work. Now, over a 5-year period, that would be just under $100 per year that would be levied through the assessment. If you, at the other end of this table, lived on a corner lot, for example, with quite a bit of sidewalk, the total cost could be much more significant, up to just under $2,000. But again, over a 5-year period, we would reduce that down to what we are estimating around $360. So these costs are estimates. They're based on the latest material unit prices that we've been seeing for this type of work around the city. As anybody who's been to a hardware store in the past few months would know, cost of materials can be volatile, but we do think that leveraging the purchasing power of the city to get this work performed on a large scale will result in cost savings to the residents who participate and opt into the program. We are assuming through this cost a 100% opt-in rate. Now, in reality, there will be residents who will choose to fix the sidewalks themselves, and we will likely not need to spend the full $1.15 million. But in the event that they choose to take part in our program, great, and we will push forward with that amount. Now, the code that you're going to see later tonight is really outlining the legal process for administering this program. And there's a 5-step legislative process that is going to be created through the adoption of the new 52106 code. And the first step in that would be adopting a program area where the city would run a sidewalk program. And these are council actions that the administration will propose to council, and then council will take action to move them forward. And they all follow each other. So assuming a program area is adopted, the next step would be passing a resolution of necessity. This is a resolution outlined in state law that gives the city authority to go in and conduct repairs that will be on behalf of a property owner. The next step would be permission to bid the sidewalk program itself, followed by authorizing the mayor and public service director to enter into contract with our chosen contractor. The final step of the process would be taking the actual repair costs that were made in the field and levying a special assessment against the properties who participated in the program. This cycle would occur through the life of the program and then would repeat for every year's sidewalk maintenance program that did occur. That's the general process and the general overview of the sidewalk maintenance program itself. Now, what I'd like to do is go into the code sections, and in particular, the section I believe that is part of 38/2021 That is specific to the legislative process I just outlined, and that details the different codes or the different steps that would be taken. So as a quick overview, we have that code section presented as the Sidewalk Maintenance Program code. Now, we are offering another 52106 code section that is in place to allow us to move forward with code enforcement activities utilizing newer maintenance standards that are updated to be more comprehensive and be consistent with what we're showing in the Sidewalk Maintenance Program itself. So in the event that, in the likely event that we'll have discussion about the sidewalk program, we would ask that the update to 52106, the updated section, move forward separately. So just to give you an understanding of what the two documents are, but the first, I guess, part that I'd like to walk through is, I believe, titled 52106 Proposed Repeal and Replace Draft. So if you're looking at that document, it's a number of pages long. And again, this is outlining the steps of the legislative process and what the city will be doing on our end to administer the sidewalk maintenance program.
If I could like council's reference, that would be Ordinance 0038.
Yes.
I couldn't understand. There was a lot of feedback.
From me or the...
For whatever Lori said, I couldn't understand her.
It would be Ordinance 0038-2021 is the ordinance to repeal and replace 52106 with the new sidewalk maintenance code, what I'll call it. So if you're looking at that code, it has a number of sections, Part A being definitions, and most of this is fairly ordinary, simply defining the different parts of sidewalks, abutting owners, and the terms that are referenced in the code. But I'd direct your attention to section A7, which is the primary inspection area. So on a given calendar year, when a program is being proposed, the director will present to council a primary area where they would seek to have a sidewalk program active, which council would then, through resolution, adopt that program area. That is the initial step to kickstart the sidewalk program. And as we've discussed previously, the goal of our program area is that it run concurrent with past street maintenance programs. The benefit of that to the city is that the handicap ramps and the crosswalks at intersections within that program area will have been updated through the street program. So the pedestrian route between the sidewalk abutting private properties will connect with a maintained pedestrian route across streets as well. So the goal of this is to create a continuous run of maintained sidewalk. Now, that primary inspection area, again, would be proposed by the director and adopted by council resolution annually, or as the sidewalk program is presented. Now, section B of this code, moving down, this is a reiteration of much of what is in 52106 today. And this is establishing the local level ordinance that places the obligation of sidewalk maintenance on the abutting property owner. It goes a bit further to clarify that section 91308, which explains the maintenance obligations of homeowners who have vegetation near the sidewalk, that there's also a responsibility to maintain that vegetation so it doesn't obstruct the passage of pedestrians across the sidewalk. Again, this is mostly simply reiterating the text that's in 52106 today and putting it in the replaced code section. Now, part C of this is the inspection program itself, and what this states is that once a sidewalk program area has been adopted, there will be an inspection of that area, and that inspection will proceed with the adoption of an area, and then we will go through and look at all of the sidewalks in the program area and apply our sidewalk maintenance criteria to that, which is outlined in Part D. So Part C and D speak to the performing of an inspection following the adoption of a program area. Part E is the next step. And this is an administrative step. There's no council action here, but once an inspection is complete, the city would notify those owners of property where sidewalk has been found to be deficient, and that notice would include all of the information outlined in Part E of this code. Some of this is required as part of state law surrounding resolutions of necessity and eventual special assessments. So this information helps keep us consistent with the state guidelines and also just serves to provide residents full transparency and information about what this program is doing and what they can expect to see on this. It also outlines their rights under what I'll call 521-06E4C, their ability to opt out of this program. They'll be given a pre-addressed envelope that will have their opt-out information in it. It will have a right-of-way permit in it, and they'll be able to send that back to the city and let us know that they have chosen to maintain their own sidewalks. Also in here, we have Part E, just below Part C of this section, that discusses the possibility that trees will be removed possibly or pruned as part of this program. That is again going to be in the initial notice to residents. Once an inspection has been performed, we will let them know whether there are affected trees on their property. Now, that's a lot of code section there. So if there's any questions on the notice, I can take those now because it does define a lot of things that are going to take place. Once the city finds through an inspection that there may be sidewalk needing maintained. I see a hand up. I don't know if we want to pause for a moment or keep going.
Do you have a question, Marissa?
Yeah, I think this is maybe just kind of a basic question, and I apologize if you covered this last year. I don't remember. One of the, I guess, questions that I have is that the ability for somebody to opt into a city repair plan, is that limited to being within the designated area that's being looked at for that year? Okay.
Yes, it is. It's a good question. And that is part of this creating a program area through this code section is defining sort of the steps that will take place within that area. Opting in is really only it's really only an option for the people who are part of the program. Because we're planning specific alignments, we're budgeting for a specific amount of sidewalk in every given year. The goal is that we're focusing on.
I don't know. Anyway, I feel a little bit better.
Somebody is not on mute that maybe should be. Okay. I guess the follow-up question I had to that was, my concern that I see is that what if there is a violation? The sidewalk is not where it needs to be, but the homeowner enforcement is being pursued against the homeowner, and the homeowner is concerned about costs or not able to pay. What options do we have for them? And I'm sure that this hypothetical has come up, so kind of can you guys give me some guidance on that?
Yeah, it is a question that's been asked. It was something that came up in the feedback we collected through our public engagement earlier in April. And it's something that our code enforcement officers, first of all, always work with anyone that they're pursuing enforcement action against to try and understand, are there things that they can do now? Are there things that they maybe have to wait for funding to become available? But that has been marginally successful, I'll say. One thing that we will still be doing is having a code enforcement process separate from this program that is continuing to take place in the areas outside of the primary program area, because it is still an obligation of the property owners in Gahanna to maintain the sidewalk. And if we could afford to expand this program to the entire city in a given year, we would try to do that. But it isn't something that we can plan for or budget for and have some measure of success with.
So I guess just so I think that I'm hearing the same thing, that if after a couple years we're able to sort of reassess costs, that maybe that's an option in the future. Is that door open where we could where people who are not part of the target area could opt into the program? Is that something that's on the horizon or that would be flexible in the future?
I don't know that it's on the immediate horizon, but I will say that in the code that's been crafted here to define the program area, that is again an area that is being defined each year as it's presented to council. So there is a program area adoption process that does define who is part of each year's program, and that doesn't preclude having the type of arrangement you're describing being part of the program. It's just not something that we're proposing at this time because it would be, we think, administratively burdensome to do that, as well as to budget for that. So it's a large enough program as it is, and getting it moving forward and having it be successful, we were trying to really plan for its success as best we can to kick it off right now.
Is there a tracking mechanism in place so that we can kind of compare maybe where there may be code issues or perhaps there's an area where there's degrading sidewalks, that we would track that so we can line that up with future areas?
There is tracking of code violations existing through our llama databases, where we do log all those violations and pursue them. We do, however, this program area following street programs is not necessarily aligned with locations where there may be complaints about sidewalk or concerns about a particular run of sidewalk. And that is, again, intentional to seek the goal of having continuous sidewalks, focusing this so that the city's efforts to build new sidewalks through our street programs, to maintain crosswalks through our street programs, also line up with this program to make sure the sidewalks connecting those intersections are also improved.
John, is there, I know this is an issue we discussed at length multiple times over the past year. And ultimately, and I think John's done an excellent job of articulating all the challenges around trying to expand this beyond what the program area would be. And quite simply, there's just no way for us to forecast or budget what that could look like. And it's potentially an open checkbook, which we can't do that. So we had to come up with some kind of parameter around that, aligning to what the street program was and following a program area. Would at least ensure that we have a dedicated area and a planned area that we know that we're going to hit, and we can track those neighborhoods. And I also, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we also discussed the fact that in terms of the actual construction and repair costs, that to have everything in one particular area also makes a difference. And it's a little bit easier and more efficient for us to manage the cost of what this program looks like, rather than to just kind of being knee-jerk reaction to how we're going to hit this.
Yes, that is a good point, Mayor, and it does build into the overall cost of each individual property's repairs. We get really one price for this type of work, and that is the unit price for sidewalk replacement for all of the sidewalk in the program. So similar to our street program, if a contractor bid a higher unit price because they had to mobilize to a variety of different areas around the city, then that affects everybody who's part of the sidewalk program. And then every resident would pay a higher price. The city would pay a higher price up front for those maintenance efforts. And trying to jump around to address specific concerns at individual locations would likely lead to higher costs for everyone else in the program.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and I think that that is an absolutely fair point. I think I'm just looking at, and I'm not asking for crystal ball gazing, because I know that that is not something that we can do, but looking back at data that's been collected or that will be collected, and just overlaying that data with the work that is going forward. That's all I'm just suggesting.
Brian, do you have a question?
Yes, just a second. Trying to get my hand down. Yes, so John, just making sure I'm following a couple of things here, and I'll look through the detail because I'm guessing we'll have more discussion on this probably at next committee. The million estimate, I'm just rounding numbers, that's annual, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So in concept, this ends up being a 5-year spend. At year 6, we'll recover more or less $1 million and spend $1 million. And that would be the path going forward until we get, as a community, caught up. And then again, barring inflation, all those other details. And then after year 15, there would be a significant step down in the annual costs because now we've got a repeating cycle and things have recovered. We're not dealing with 40, 50-year-old sidewalk that needs to be repaired more extensively. Is that roughly kind of the outline here?
Yeah, that's correct. The money coming in would scale up in years 1 through 6, and then would scale back down in years 15 through 20.
Right. Yep. I guess from a simplicity standpoint, so folks understand, in reality, this is an opt-out program, period. And the reason I say it that way is there aren't 2 different options. It is the program, if it's implemented, everyone is in it, unless they submit an opt-out. So as described, saying there's this option and that option, there's not really multiple options. It's if the program is started, we run it, it's centralized unless an individual opts out.
Yeah, there is not an opt-in option here. Yes, right. There is. The program area creates the properties who would be in the program.
Right. Just trying to make it understandable for any potential crowd, because it's not 2 different things that we're discussing. What we have in front of us is an opt-out program. Does this fall under anything that would fit within prevailing wage requirements?
Yes, it would be prevailing wage as a city project. Yeah.
Okay. And then just as a recovery of memory, way back in time, as we initially started these discussions, there was an inventory that was done. And what I don't recall is whether that was a comprehensive inventory or a spot inventory. Can you kind of remind what exactly was done with that?
Sure. It was a spot inventory of particular streets around the city of Gahanna. And so we looked.
Sorry, randomly selected?
No, they were selected. They were intentionally selected to represent the different neighborhoods that were constructed and the eras and ages at which those streets were constructed. Some of them intentionally included street trees, some did not. Some included, newer developments. We also selected commercial corridors, so North Hamilton and South Hamilton both. So it was a collection of the different types of sidewalk, the different properties that front sidewalk, and the different ages of that sidewalk around the city. The goal being that we got a representative sample on average across the city so we could look at budgeting a long-term program.
Right. Okay. And then from an implementation standpoint, this is a geographic structure, or is there another structure to this 15-year cycle? In other words, you're doing quadrants of the city on a 15-year basis, or you've broken this up in some other fashion?
It's going to follow past street programs. So what we'll look at is streets that have been resurfaced over the past years, and we'll be maintaining those sidewalks along those streets that have been maintained. So it will follow the pattern of construction that you see in our street program, where most every ward every year has work occurring within it, but it doesn't necessarily follow a quadrant basis.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand if you're just blocking the city out by geographic sections, or there's another method. So what you're saying is you'll go back X years, look at that year's street program and use that as an approximation of the area for and or, might be several years, whatever. But the point is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, some segment of years of street program, that'll be bundled, and that'll be the sidewalks that are looked at for evaluation for that particular year cycle. And then until it gets all caught back up.
Yes, that's a very good explanation of that.
Mr. Leesburg, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple of questions. You mentioned street tree removal. We're just cutting them down. We're leaving the stumps. We're taking the stumps out. What are we doing with those? And is there any plan to put other trees back in? I guess would be the question. So, what does removal entail, and what are the plans for? Is there a plan for putting it back in?
So the removal would include stump grinding. So the goal is removal and stump grinding of the trees. In terms of the follow-up question, I'm going to defer to Stephanie, who's going to be on the call later on to discuss the tree code. And I believe our city forester is also on the call as well. Although I see Stephanie popping in now, maybe.
I don't need to steal your thunder if you want to handle it later. That's fine.
Okay, I'm happy to. I'm okay to answer it now. It actually made it better in this conversation, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
As far as replacement, there of course is the desire to encourage individuals to replant their street trees. That is not part of this program, so we would not be funding the replacement of any trees. Again, there is the desire to evaluate that as we move forward, especially through this process of the street or the sidewalk program. And once the program is in motion, to evaluate what the cost of replacing those trees would be in a future budget year.
So I guess as a follow-up to that, if the city comes through and deems that my tree needs to go because it was the problem, I may be required to put the tree back in at my cost.
The resident would be responsible for replacing the tree at this point, yes.
Okay. Is that available to? It's not available to 5% at a 0% 5-year loan though, like the sidewalk. Not now.
That's correct. That's not part of the actual sidewalk program.
Okay. As far as we've got some that are so far out of whack. Who's going to determine how to put them in? In other words, who's handling the engineering plans and putting these things in and shooting grade and all that kind of stuff for this process? Or if there's no sidewalk in front, there's a lot of areas in town that don't have sidewalks. So how is that being handled?
In terms of who is completing the inspection itself?
Design. No, design.
So this is purely a replacement and repair program. So the design would simply be per standard drawings of putting sidewalk back. We've adopted City of Columbus standard section of sidewalk. The actual bid document itself would include quantities of repair, this precision cutting, and replacement as a unit price. And it wouldn't be designed per se in that we'd be setting a line and grade. Most of the work would be matching adjoining panels for grade, and then our inspectors would be monitoring the cross slope as it's put back in place.
I guess tying into existing at some point, I mean, there's a lot of times where you can't match. Again, you've got point A and point B, and what happens in the middle could be a drive apron and those kind of things. What happens when those things don't match? I mean, when you've got three things that don't move, I can straight line between A and B, but if I've got a drive approach in between, what if the running slope between point A and my drive apron, which is existing, is 6%, 8% running slope? See my point?
Yeah, no, I do, and that's, you've actually opened a window into the ADA transition plan with this one. So one of the code sections that you'll be seeing tonight is an update to 901, I believe 03, which is our replacement and repair standards. And in that, we are adopting ProWAG, which is an updated version of ADAG, which is a guiding document from the federal government on what you do with sidewalks in public right-of-way. And in that document, it provides guidance on the situation you described, where let's say the slopes that exist restrict you from putting in a sidewalk panel that matches the City of Columbus cross slope and running slope standards. That is okay. You are constrained on all sides by existing features that you would have to remove and replace in order to make this one sidewalk panel comply with the new construction standards. So you are allowed through PROAG, which we are adopting with one of these ordinances, to put that sidewalk back and match the existing features. You don't have a requirement through the city, or you wouldn't, and you wouldn't have a requirement through the federal government to replace your entire driveway, for example, in order to fix one panel of sidewalk.
Okay. So this is purely replacement. So any areas in town that don't have sidewalks, how are we handling that?
Those are handled through capital projects. We do put in new sidewalk with our street program when we go through and rebuild streets that do not have sidewalk, and other trail connection projects separately. So this is purely a maintenance project.
Okay.
And there was one other question that I failed to mention with the trees, but the opt-out program, Mr. Larrick, you're correct. If you do choose to opt out, you preserve your tree. So if you don't want the city to entertain removing a tree and you opt out and fix your own sidewalk, then the city isn't taking down your tree with that effort. So someone who was interested in preserving their tree could opt out, make their own sidewalk repairs, and then deal with the tree how they saw fit.
If I could also add, we recognize that saving street trees is a priority for many of our residents. In fact, the feedback that we had was quite interesting, because there were some individuals who felt like we should just take all the street trees down and never have them anymore, and others who were, please don't take my street tree, and what if I want to save it? And I will say that our city forester, Julie Perderi and John Moorhead, as well as their other members of the park staff, and the city engineer staff worked diligently, especially over the last few weeks, to try to find a solution and evaluate different options that could reduce the number of trees that would have to come out, so that we could save as many trees as possible. And again, I don't want to steal Stephanie's thunder or John's or even Julie's if she's on the line to talk about what that looks like. But we were able to go back, they were able to go back and examine, explore other options for how they could deal with trees that might be impacting a sidewalk, such as just pruning the roots or doing some other mechanisms that not only allowed us to reduce the number of trees that we thought would have to be removed, but also substantially reduce the cost. We ended up saving over $600,000 from the projection that we had originally given to you back in November and December with the projection that's given now. So I thank them for being diligent and trying to explore different options, and we'll continue to do that as much as we can, because we are a Tree City USA, and we want to maintain that designation as much as we can, and to continue to evaluate options that will reduce us having to take that drastic step.
I had a question. When you're talking about doing where you've already done street repairs, but in the past, it seems like I've noticed that when a street is repaired or rebuilt, that all the properties along that seem to improve. It's like they've got a new street, and so all of a sudden they're sprucing up their yards, sprucing up their houses, possibly repairing the sidewalks that need to be repaired. So do you think that do you think that there will be enough needed sidewalk repair on places where we've done the streets? Does that make sense?
I do think that people who get a new street, it sort of refreshes the look of the streetscape, and I think people do kind of revisit what their home looks like and their frontage looks like when that occurs. Most people don't think of sidewalks right away, I guess, when they look at improving the appeal of their home. So I would expect we'd still have sidewalk repairs to make along those streets. But it would help add to that new appeal of, you have a new street, you have repaired sidewalks. I mean, I think the community as a whole benefits from having these improvements occur in broad swaths, right, across whole city blocks.
Okay, and the second thing, when you choose the project area, if, say, you budget for like $1 million, and then maybe there's only $900,000 worth of repairs that year. Could you pull in some other properties for that last $100,000 that maybe aren't in the area, but they desperately need repair?
So because of the way the legislation will be passed to create the sidewalk area, and then the resolution of necessity, most importantly, we wouldn't be able to do that within one program area. However, if we do save funds on one program year and there's money left over, it could be possible that could be rolled into the next year's program and help us expand, the scope of the following year.
Okay, that makes sense. There's one other question. What if somebody opts out and then doesn't do the repair?
We will talk about that at the lower down in the code.
Okay, all right.
We are creating, essentially, there'll be a timeline where a person has enough time to opt out, hire a contractor, make a repair, and then if they don't make that repair, we will be able to discover that before proceeding with our own construction work. Okay. And so we would simply treat it as if they had not opted out and go forward to make the repairs through the program.
All right. Brian, did you have another question? I'm sorry.
Yep, I do. With regard to the opt-out, how is that tracked and managed? So I opt out, I'm going to take care of it, and then I don't.
So you're given the date that we mail you a notice. You have a timeline that begins of when you can opt out and when you need to make the repair by. So at the end of that timeline, what we will do is revisit the areas and determine whether or not the repair has been made. It's being tracked through right-of-way permits. So the city currently documents all the right-of-way permits that we receive. So if you opt out and you file a right-of-way permit, we will have a record of that. Our staff will inspect your work when it's performed and make sure that it's done. And at that point, we can check you off the list to say this property they don't need to be included in the program.
Yeah, I think my question is, I'm making an assumption here, that the timing of getting the work done is, I'm assuming, is not going to coincide with the timing of the city pursuing the opted-in work. So I won't get it done before the city has to get the contract in place, is my guess. And if that's the case, does it just fall to the next season? Is it, that's what I'm trying to understand. Unless I'm mistaken in that the timing does fit where they opt out and get it fixed or not, and it's still within the window of the city doing the contract.
So the timing is something we looked at pretty intensively to try to understand exactly how we were going to structure this, to give people enough time to, one, budget for this, get a contractor, schedule that contractor. So we are planning now that the way this program would function is that in the spring of, let's say, 2022, council adopts a program area. We inspect it. We issue mailers out to those residents, say, around this time. They then have the entire summer, essentially, to get the concrete work performed. And then at the end of the summer is when that opt-out period expires. At that time, we'll do an evaluation, see what work needs to be done, begin to assemble bid documents, prepare the program to bid. We will bid the work for 2022 in the winter so that the work can then proceed for the 2022 street program in the 2023 construction window. So you'll have a fairly long time as a resident to either budget and do the work on your own before the city steps in and kind of puts you into the capital program that we're running.
Essentially, this is a year behind process. So you'll do an assessment, identify the opt-in work. You'll do that work that year. The opt-out people have that season to get it taken care of. If it's not taken care of, then it falls to the following season. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, it would be the program that was created in, say, 2022, but it would be constructed by the city the following season. Yes.
I think I'm following. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One other question. You said that sometimes you would just repair part of the panel, the sidewalk panel, and other times the whole panel. If the city says you only have to replace part of it, can the homeowner say, no, I want you to replace all of it?
No, if the city determines that the panel can be repaired without replacing it in full, we would make that repair, just because it would be much more cost effective for the city. The resident, again, would have the ability to opt out and replace more sidewalk if they wanted to. Okay. And there are people who just like the look of new sidewalk, and they would rather have a panel replaced than repaired.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, it looks like we answered all at this point.
Okay. If that covers it, I will move on through the code. And again, we are in the proposed repeal and replace of 52106. And we are in section F at this moment. So I'll give everybody a moment to catch up again, and we'll go into that. So section F is describing the opt-out process. So we've discussed around this a bit here, but what it says is that if you choose to opt out and take responsibility for performing those repairs, you have 45 days from the date that we send the notice to the resident to notify us that you choose to opt out. That notice will include these three items. One is that you'll identify the contractor who's performing the work. You'll identify how you plan to repair the sidewalk and acknowledge, and this will simply be a signature line, that if the work is not completed in a fashion acceptable to the city within 105 days of the notice, that you will be in violation of the ordinance and we will proceed as if you didn't opt out, essentially. So that 105 days is a bit of an odd timing, but essentially what that means is you have 45 days to tell us you plan to opt out. And then from that deadline, you have another 60 days to complete the work. So that initial timing is fairly, I think, generous in terms of when you can notify us. And then the final 60 days is, you've brought on a contractor, they've got 2 months to get out and make the repairs, which most folks can accommodate for sidewalk work. So this section F is describing that process that we just sort of talked about here. And again, this notice back to the city of you opting out is going to take the form of sort of a letter saying as much, and then a right-of-way permit that includes this contractor information and kind of the description of your repair work. Moving on from this, there's a consent clause here that simply says that each property owner is deemed to have consented within this program of these three things. Number one being that if for some reason we need to go onto private property to maintain a sidewalk, which is going to be a rare case, but if that had to happen and you didn't consent to allowing the city or our contractors to do that, there may be expenses incurred for us to do that work within the bounds of the right-of-way. So that's just a notice that we may seek entry onto property to make this more cost-effective. I don't expect it to happen frequently, but it's in there as a necessary step. Part two is that you're consenting for the city to do work maintaining vegetation. That's removing roots and trees within the right-of-way. This includes if you have a tree that's on the private side of the lot and its roots are intruding onto the sidewalk. In that case, we won't take down a tree, but we may cut its roots if they are encroaching on the sidewalk. And we've worked with our city forester to develop some guidance on how we can do that and help promote the health of that tree. And then the last one here is simply a criminal liability immunity sentence here. Part H, this is a notice that a property owner who receives this notice that they have sidewalk to be repaired has a duty to disclose in writing that notice if they transfer the property to another owner. So again, there's a fairly generous time window between the work occurring and being notified of this need. What this is meant to say is that if you sell the property because you've been given this notice, you should contact the person you're selling to and let them know that this is occurring. Because the city resolution of necessity is subject to the property itself, not necessarily the owner. So the work will continue even if the property changes ownership. during the course of a program.
Karen, do you have a
Nancy?
question now?
I do have a question. What happens if somebody doesn't, has a friend that feels that they can do this type of sidewalk replacement or taking care of it? Do you have to have a contractor, or can it be done?
Your friend's friend is welcome to repair or replace the sidewalk. We do ask that they notify us the method they plan to use, but there is not a contractor requirement for repairing the sidewalk. It can be self-performed, it can be performed by a friend. We will be inspecting it, and so there are probably some kind of home-cooked sidewalk repair measures that we might not accept, but we're trying to keep it fairly open so that people have a lot of options.
You probably do it on a YouTube thing, you know.
Well, I'm sure there's a YouTube video for this.
No, I that surprises me that you're not asking for a contractor. Obviously, that would be a better way to do it, but I think we should probably make that clear that you can attempt to do it by yourself, I guess. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad or not. Contractors tend to do things a little bit better, but that's what I.
When they get the they have to get a permit to repair the sidewalk. And so when they do that, wouldn't they tell them, like, I know that when we had ours done, that the sidewalk across the driveway has to be a different mix than a regular sidewalk because it has to support cars. So wouldn't you tell them that when they apply for the permit, like what mix it had to be or strength or something like that?
Yes, and that is when I say that you don't necessarily have to be a professional concrete contractor to make some of these repairs, we are still going to express to them all of the standards that they need to meet for the sidewalk to be accepted by the city. And you're absolutely right. There's different thicknesses of walk within the driveway. It isn't something that I would encourage anyone to try to do just because they watched a YouTube video, but there are folks who have poured concrete successfully and may want to do it themselves.
Thank you.
Sean, I'm sorry, don't we also have the requirement in F1 that any contractor has to work with all licensing and permitting requirements within the city? So.
Yes, we do. Yes, and we do have some requirements for contractors to be registered with the city. So there's a contractor registration form that building permits require. That is essentially stating that they have insurance. So those contractors can get registered with the city. I will say that building code itself allows owners of property to perform certain improvements without being a contractor. And so there are some things that a homeowner can do, maybe they shouldn't do, but they can do, and they don't have to be a licensed contractor to do it.
Okay.
So moving on, we were at section H, and moving to I. This is the resolution of necessity. So again, we're advancing through the legislative steps of the sidewalk program. So we've kind of passed the program area in the notice phase, and now we're moving to the resolution of necessity. So this is the city administration preparing a list of all of the properties that would be included in the program and submitting to council that list, seeking a resolution of necessity, describing what work is to be performed. And in that resolution, we are going to have an estimate of the repairs. So there'll be a budgeted item, but then the resolution of necessity itself will be the first time that council is presented with, these are the properties and the estimated cost of repairs on each property, including the total. So this simply states the process for the resolution of necessity, how that would proceed. The next step is assessment. So what this says is that after the work is completed and all of the owners will be notified of a public hearing, this is a requirement of state law, and that notice will include several items which are listed here in this section. At that hearing, council will hear a presentation from staff of the actual cost of work performed on each property, and that will be different from the initial estimate. So the assessment will reflect the actual bid prices of work performed and then direct measurements in the field of all sidewalk repair or replacement on a property. Council certifies those costs and then passes the assessment, which would be this 5-year 0% interest recoupment process. So this would go to the tax roll of the properties and be collected through property taxes. Now, Section K is what we alluded to earlier. We discussed in brief that a property owner who opts out of the program but fails to repair their sidewalk will be given a notice, will be advised that the city will proceed to complete the construction as if they had not opted out. There are penalties in this chapter, so if you were to opt out and then not make the repairs, you may be subject to, I believe, a minor misdemeanor, which is consistent with our other code violations, our existing sidewalk code violations. And then this notice that you may be subject to civil proceedings. Going down to Section L, this simply references Section 90301 of our code, which is the existing code section that spells out sidewalk specifications. That is also being proposed to change with one of the ordinances tonight to update it a bit to better fit with the sidewalk program. Section M here is the violation clause. So any person whose violation of this chapter shall be fined, no less than 50, no more than 150, and that would be a minor misdemeanor. So that concludes the 52106 repeal and replacement. That is the code to support a sidewalk maintenance program. What I'd like to do now is discuss the other two code sections, the other 52106 for one, that is simply an update. So if, as I expect, we'll have more conversation about the sidewalk program, we would like to proceed with 52106, the proposed update section, and get that passed and updated so that code enforcement at the moment, they're sort of in an area where the city is considering new sidewalk maintenance standards, but we have existing standards on the books. And if we're going to be having an extended discussion about the program, we would like to at least update the existing code to reflect the standards of maintenance in that program so that we can proceed and have a consistent and comprehensive approach to code enforcement that isn't going to be altered in some future sidewalk program. So the proposed changes that you see are an update to that, and the critical thing here is in 52106 Part B, we are striking the existing maintenance standards and referencing the City of Gahanna Sidewalk Maintenance Guidelines, which is a document that's going to be administered by the Director of Public Service or their designee and kept on file so we can have a list of those sidewalk maintenance criteria that are in force within the city. What I will say is that under Part C, we also talked about tree removal or repair. Tree removal or repair caused by tree growth. There is a section that says "and will be assessed?" ? That I think is underlined and it's supposed to be struck. So that is not part of the code that we are presenting. It's sort of survived this red line process. But the rest of it is updating notification and language to be more consistent and reflect what the sidewalk program is going towards. And again, the goal there is that if we are going to have a long time between the sidewalk program becoming effective, we would like to have this code in place so that the maintenance standards in our code match what the proposed sidewalk program is going towards. And even if we never have a sidewalk program, which I hope isn't the case, I think the update to 52106 is still necessary so that we get those maintenance guidelines corrected.
Okay.
Okay, going to 90301, and this is a update to 90301. This is going to be, we'd like this to be updated regardless, sidewalk program or no. What this is doing is spelling out the PROAG, the Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines that I mentioned. And those guidelines are federally published guidelines that describe how to manage accessible features in the public right-of-way, because there are lots of complications to doing that. And the government drafted this document to help local communities do that kind of work. So this is amending our current specification of following City of Columbus guidelines and just kind of a boilerplate federal ADA guidelines is what it used to say. We want to specifically reference PROAG. And then go to this question of that repairs to existing sidewalk shall be approved by the director or their designee. That is to allow greater flexibility in evaluating repairs performed by contractors or folks who opt out. There may be a number of repair methods. There's a lot of proprietary methods that come up and go away and different contractors use them. We don't want to codify exactly what repair methods you might use because that might preclude things down the road that we might want to accept. So that section update is there just to, one, help us conform with ADA guidelines and the transition plan that we adopted, but also to focus more on repair of sidewalk rather than construction or replacement of sidewalk.
Okay. All right. So, are those the only ones? They're not in order on my agenda. So. And I'm sorry. We sort no, that's okay. I'm just sure we don't want to miss anything that you have. Is that all the sections you have?
Those are all the sections that I have. Stephanie is going to discuss tree updates to the tree code.
Okay.
913 that is part of the sidewalk program. This tree code does have some overlapping text with sidewalk maintenance in the comprehensive landscape plan itself. So Stephanie has some of that code to discuss, but we're leaving the sidewalk code for a moment.
Okay. Before we do that, what if all the things that John mentioned we just put on for first reading and then bring them back in 2 weeks to discuss? Is that okay with everybody? Because I've just seen some of these things, so we'll bring it back, and if people have more questions in 2 weeks, then we can do that. So okay, what?
There's a fifth Monday this month. So it will be.
Oh, it'd be 3 weeks. The first meeting, first meeting in June. How about that?
Committee meeting, yeah.
Committee meeting in June, first committee meeting in June. You're right. Thank you, Karen.
So, hey, Nancy, this is Mike.
Sure.
Regarding the process, no objection there. I'm just wondering if I might get one question in here for John before we shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So, John, just for my own edification, and I see this is in the existing 903.01, and it's going to carry forward in the proposed section 903.01. As somebody that's uninitiated to the world of civil engineering, what is at a very high level the City of Columbus standard construction drawings for sidewalks? Why do we reference, I guess, the City of Columbus, and then I guess how is that compatible with PROAG?
Good question, and good thing to try to clarify, because those documents, all three of the reference documents in that section, are very dense and catered to civil engineers. The construction, the standard drawing is a physical drawing that the City of Columbus has published that says if you build sidewalk, it will be this thick, made out of this type of concrete, and it's going to be, this size. We adopt that so that we have a consistent sidewalk product around the city. There's nothing particularly special about Columbus's sidewalk standard other than that it is regionally accepted and many contractors know exactly what it is if you tell them I need a City of Columbus standard sidewalk. PROAG is independent of that. And what that drawing does is it sets rigid guidelines. This is what the sidewalk needs to be. And there's cases where, as Jamie mentioned earlier, you might not be able to build exactly what's on that drawing if you're just replacing one piece of sidewalk in your existing driveway approach. So the PROAG is guidance that gives us some flexibility in when is it okay to deviate from that drawing but still comply with ADA requirements. Now, the third document, the construction and material specifications, is essentially the Bible of construction materials. And it is literally, it's thousands of pages, and it describes in unending detail the type of stone that can be in the concrete, the type of sand that you need, more detail than anyone would ever want to know about sidewalks or any material.
Sure, I think I get it now, at least from a layman's perspective. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ray, do you have a question or comment?
Yes. What I just wanted to point out, I like the way you're doing everything. 0033, please keep in mind that even though you're going to bring it back to committee, I would really recommend that you look at that one as to being in place immediately, so, because we are kind of in a position where people are asking to have sidewalks repaired and replaced, and yet we're trying to not make people double repair them. So if anything, when you come back and talk about 0033, please look at putting that one in place as soon as possible. That would be my recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Malarski. I was going to request the same thing. And would, John, would 903.01 also be the companion piece, because that would adopt PROAG?
Yeah, so we would like that to go forward, because that doesn't need to be linked to the sidewalk program to go forward. And it's, I think, a fairly simple update that we would like to see move forward quickly as well.
Which ordinance? The one is 33.
Right, 0033 and 0034 would be the two that we would request to move forward while the others are being perhaps more debated.
Because they don't, are you asking for waiver of second or emergency on those?
No.
No, so that would still, okay, so, all right. So but we will try to move those forward from the next committee meeting for, okay, got it. So 033, all right, thank you. All right, so next up is Stephanie.
Yes, thank you. So Ordinance 0035 is what we're discussing now. The Landscape Board was presented information introducing the sidewalk program earlier in May. And within that discussion, Gahanna Code Chapter 913, which is landscape requirements, was reviewed to add specific references to sidewalks as well as multi-use paths. And that's under 913.03B, as well as replacing the injurious plant list to be referenced directly to the comprehensive landscape plan. And that's under the definitions, which is 913.043, as well as 913.10I. And the comprehensive landscape plan is a document that's reviewed every 3 years by the Landscape Board and then presented to council. And upon approval, that plan constitutes as the official landscape plan for the city. So the plan provides a master tree plan to provide clear guidance of tree care standards as well as landscape requirements. With this information, administration is respectfully requesting for legislation to amend these changes in Chapter 13 as reviewed and recommended by the City of Gahanna's Landscape Board. Similar to what John had mentioned from 903, this is a practice that we would like to move forward on regardless of the sidewalk program. It makes sense for how the Landscape Board would be able to provide guidance under the comprehensive landscape plan. Happy to answer any questions.
It's I'm scrolling up. It has a list of injurious plants, but then it's all crossed out. It says refer to the comprehensive, but where is that?
So the comprehensive landscape plan is a separate document. It's not within that code. So the idea would be to remove that injurious or prohibited plant list from code and
Okay.
reference it directly with the comprehensive landscape plan.
Gotcha. Okay. But do we have a copy of that attached here?
It is not attached to that. I'll make sure that council receives that. It was last reviewed in 2019.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
No.
Okay, then we will. Do you need this to come back for more discussion? You might have
Since it's with all the others, Nancy, maybe just do first reading and bring it back. If anything
Okay.
comes up, it does, and if not, that's fine too. It keeps it moving forward.
do it with first reading, and then we'll bring it back to committee in, I guess, about 3 weeks. First committee meeting in June. So, okay, thank you. And that'd be great if you send that comprehensive list. That'd be great, Stephanie.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, then we are, I think we finished all the ordinances. I should have printed this out if I didn't know we were going to go out of order on all these. I guess if all those have done, then we are moving on to items from council. Is that correct?
No.
No, 8. Number
No.
8.
Number 8.
Number 8. What'd I do? Oh yeah. Okay, that'd be Mr. Crawford probably.
Thank you. I think the council clerk might actually be tackling that one.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I can take over. This is Crystal. This ordinance that's on here, it's to amend ordinance 0014, which authorized the mayor to enter into agreement with Strasser Paving. This is for the street program. You all saw this first in committee in March. And so there was a clerical error in this ordinance. One, the amounts for the contract did not include the 10% contingency, which was originally requested by the service department. And it also didn't include the supplemental portion. So they've received $200,000 for that permissive tax, but they're unable to move it to the correct account without that supplemental.
Okay, any questions?
Fix it.
Yeah.
Seeing none.
Thank you, Crystal.
Okay, so we will, everyone okay with this being waived second? You want this on regular agenda or consent?
We're waiving, so we shouldn't.
Pardon?
We're waiving, so we shouldn't, but.
Yeah, it can go regular agenda. We'll waive second and just put it on the agenda for next regular meeting, council.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. So next one, items from council.
Thanks, Nancy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You still got one more.
Signatures.
Liquor permit?
That's okay. There was a request for a liquor permit for signatures at 94 Mill Street. This is a new liquor permit request, and the police department has no objections. Just like the last time, I feel like we had one of these. Karen?
Is signatures in business?
They're opening back up.
Reopening, yes.
Oh, they are open. They're reopening. Oh, okay. It was Yay.
The only question I have is this is a net new and there was a license available, or is this one of the special transfer items? I've been trying to figure that one out.
I don't know.
Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Lori.
I was saying my understanding is that this would be a new permit. The permit that had been at that location is currently perhaps the subject of pending litigation. So this would be a new permit.
Okay, but it fits within the state quota, whatever the limits are. Okay.
I believe so.
Okay. All right. Brian, did you have the next item?
Yeah, was there any action on the liquor permit, or is it just information?
I don't think we have to do anything. Unless we
you only need to. Exactly, yes.
Okay. Yes, Then with regard to item number 2, return to chambers. I think we had been talking kind of generally about returning to chambers for our meetings within the month of June, probably the second meeting in June. I've had some updates with regard to the build out work that's occurring within chambers, and it appears that there's likely a chance that there's going to be construction going on at that time to finish the technical work. And so the thought is to start fresh with our first regular meeting in July, or leave it open to council or any other, what your preferences are.
So, I
Madam
guess.
Chair.
The only thing I was thinking is that I think Crystal said we could go back earlier, but we wouldn't be able to record the meetings, and so we would not. So then the meetings would not be recorded. So my first thought was just to wait until we could do the recorded meetings. But that was just my first thought. Michael, do you have a question?
Well, more a comment, and I don't want to get too hung up on dates. It's more the infrastructure, the systems that are in place. Where I think makes the most sense, logically speaking, is that when we go into council chambers, I don't want to be dealing with IT issues and hangups and hiccups and those types of things. We've already, over the last year plus, had enough of that. This seems to be working, as imperfect as it is. It is at least functional. It checks the box for being accessible and meeting, the various requirements. My expectation would be that when we go into council chambers, it is essentially seamless. And what I mean by that is that all of the infrastructure is in place. Whatever beta testing has been required has been, tested, ad nauseum, to the point that we know that it works. I think at that point we can move to that system or that facility. But until that occurs, I don't want to chance it and sit here and end up having IT problems just because we were, anxious to get back in person.
Kevin, if you're on, looks like you are, any insight into final testing evaluation? I know from a build standpoint, it was looking at still occurring during that second meeting in June. Is July 5, 6, 7 enough time, or should we maybe table for June and look at it again with a second meeting in July timeframe?
Yeah, so physical construction is scheduled the week of the 14th. Final audio configuration and making sure that everything is tuned appropriately and those types of things from a vendor standpoint should be done by Wednesday, June 23rd. I appreciate Mr. Snetzer's comments immensely. And I think that we're either talking about the 6th or the 12th for the first meeting back. Whatever that regular meeting is, I believe that we can meet that. We can meet that requirement. Again, either the 6th or the 12th would be fine with IT.
Marissa, did you have a question?
I
thought I saw your hand up, but then it disappeared.
Red.
I think Crystal just answered it. So we would not be meeting on Monday the 5th. We are meeting on for July, correct? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, Ray.
Thank you. I would note that the current ability for you to meet without in person ends in June. So your first meeting in July has to be live unless they change things. So.
Thanks, Ryan. I knew that and forgot about it. So tentatively, our plan is July 6th meeting in chambers.
Okay. Michael, another question?
No, if my hand is up, I apologize. I can't see it on my screen, so I'll hit the button in hopes that it goes down. Thank you.
Jamie has a question, maybe?
Yeah, the question, I guess, is what is the intent for committee of the whole meetings? Are we going back to the committee room, or are we going to do everything in from the dais? Just according to minds.
I would
put in
leave that
sound system.
Chairs. What works best? Maybe we can have that conversation next committee.
I mean, I think committee meetings flow much nicer in the committee room, but we're putting a fancy sound system in chambers. It doesn't make any sense to.
Yeah.
And maybe I leave you guys with that comment though, is yes, correct. The production of the meeting and streaming of the meeting is not conducive for the committee room at this particular time. We did get quotes for equipping the committee room at I think the tune of $25,000 more for another camera and mics in the ceiling and such. But that was not budgeted and accounted for in the project. So that's
Jamie?
just a note, but you guys can obviously make those.
Certainly. Thank you. In short, though, what I would expect then, based on this, is we would meet our regular meeting on July 6th in chambers, and our committees would return to chambers as they had been year previous.
Okay. All right.
I think that's all I have for the moment.
Anything else? Okay, then we shall be adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.